Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Bryant Ardis. This is the Dr. Ardis Show, and we're so excited to have this special presentation. I titled it, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and MS are all improved with one mineral. Did you know there's just one single mineral that can actually improve every single symptom of Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and MS? And this is something I just learned about. I'm so excited to share. I knew many, many benefits for several decades, actually, of this particular mineral. And I'm excited to actually show you what I just learned about all these neurological conditions that have already been proven to be improved, not just a little bit, massively. So I'm so excited to share with you this presentation on this one particular mineral. And if you want to try to guess what it is, this show is being brought to you by the mineral called selenium. I could not believe the massive amounts of information that's published in medical research about the benefits of selenium in helping to reverse Parkinson's, MS, and Alzheimer's symptoms. And you're about to see the evidence. So those of you who are familiar, I'm going to do a PowerPoint presentation here. You're going to have access to that entire PowerPoint in the Patients Resources tab at the Dr. Ardis Show. There's a PDF. It's a digital form that is free to download, which will be this entire PowerPoint I'm about to take you through. But the information we highlight inside these research studies should blow your mind, because it blew mine as I went through them. So we're so excited to share this with you. Please, if you know anybody who's struggling with Parkinson's, MS, or Alzheimer's, please make sure they get this information. And it doesn't matter where they get selenium from. The goal is to make sure you have the information, because your life does not have to be as sabotaged by symptoms as it has been, nor do your loved ones who are struggling with any of the gait issues, memory issues, total quality of life issues that are so affected by these neurological conditions they call Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and MS. All right, so I'm going to dive into the presentation here. I'm very, very excited, as always, to share this information with you, because as we do the research, I cannot wait to show you what we found. So here we go. We're going to dive in there. Let me share the screen. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and MS have one mineral enemy, and you're about to learn what it is. I've shown you what it is, but now you're going to learn what it is. Scan the QR code to get access to our free email list, to our free documents, for our notifications on each weekly new show and any special presentations I do during the week on specific media topics and other. All right, so we're going to start with an article from verywellhealth.com. It's titled, "What Does Selenium Do to Your Body? A Dietitian Explains the Evidence." So let's dive in. Once absorbed selenium, your body uses selenium to make selenocysteine, an amino acid, and what are called selenoproteins, selenium proteins. Selenium impacts brain function, heart health, inflammation, immune function, and metabolism. This is what most of my audiences know about selenium. They know about its thyroid benefits. So the thyroid gland contains the highest selenium concentrations in the body. Many of the 25 selenoproteins, selenium-based proteins, are found in your thyroid and are involved in the synthesizing thyroid hormones. Studies show that selenium supplementation likely helps with Hashimoto's disease, Graves' disease, and other thyroid conditions. This is the number one thing I've talked about for years on this show from stages around the world, that selenium is required for the thyroid to make any thyroid hormone. So if there's any endocrinologist out there not telling their patients when they give them Synthroid or levothyroxine, if they're not giving you selenium, they are doing you a great disservice. And really, truly, those medical doctors are uneducated. And you should probably switch or educate them, share with them this PowerPoint presentation. There are three things the thyroid needs to make every thyroid hormone, and it cannot make them without it. You've heard of T3, T4 hormones. Those cannot be made unless you have selenium, iodine, and an amino acid called tyrosine. So if you're not supplementing iodine, if you're not supplementing selenium, and you're not eating foods that are rich in L-tyrosine or supplementing L-tyrosine, you will be hypothyroid. Some of you will be Graves' disease, which is hyperthyroid, but there are many other thyroid conditions that can also be evidenced by the impact of not supplementing selenium. So that's what most people know about, including my followers and those listeners and viewers right now. Most people know about my emphatic discussions research we presented on the benefits of selenium to reverse thyroid conditions, which is why it's in our Thyroid Complete product. All right, now for cognition, these are still benefits of selenium alone. Selenoproteins, selenium-based proteins, have antioxidant properties that help reduce oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is basically how it is science describes what leads to disease in any organ. So they're saying selenium helps to reduce disease processes in the brain, a factor that can cause cognitive decline. Lab studies have shown that selenium has brain protective properties. Nationwide survey of adults over age 65. Adequate selenium intake was associated with higher cognitive function scores. All those out there that are 60 years old and older, any of you who have loved ones who are older than 65 years and older and are dealing with memory issues, cognitive decline, please forward this presentation to them. Please share this presentation far and wide. Every single score, I'm about to show you these scores, by the way, are improved with selenium supplementation, and it doesn't take much at all. Heart health, some research suggests that inadequate selenium levels, so lower than normal selenium levels, may increase the risk of heart attacks, heart failure, coronary heart disease, and other heart health issues. Animal studies also show that selenium supplementation may help decrease the risk of these issues. This is from science.org. Titled article, Widely Available Supplement May Explain Brain Boost from Exercise. So there is, I showed you earlier, my version, our formulation of our selenium product. They're telling you here that selenium is a supplement widely available, but does exercise have an impact on the body's amount of selenium to improve brain function? And this is what they discovered. Now, Walker and her colleagues think they have found a key, the chemical element selenium. During exercise, mice produce a protein containing selenium that helps their brains grow new neurons. Please listen to me. I have shown over and over and over that researchers who actually do chemical and drug experiments with mice say the reason why they do all studies of drugs and chemicals in mice first before ever giving it to a human is because mice have every single gene that human beings do. So they quote, I quote them, they state over and over and over, we study mice because if something happens in a mouse, we know it will absolutely happen in a human. So let's read this sentence again with that new context. During exercise, mice produce a protein containing selenium that helps the brains grow new neurons. Isn't that amazing? Well, what if you've had a concussion? What if you've had a stroke? You need new neurons that have been damaged. Selenium has been proven to do that. Scientists may also be able to harness this element to help reverse cognitive decline due to old age and brain injury. Her own research has shown selenium improves verbal fluency and the ability to copy drawings correctly in older adults. We could start thinking about selenium as a strategy to treat or prevent cognitive decline in those who cannot exercise or are more vulnerable to selenium deficiency. She says, such as older adults and stroke and Alzheimer's disease patients. In 1999, for example, researchers reported that running stimulates the brain to make new neurons in a part of the brain called the hippocampus, a region that's involved in learning and memory. So 7 years ago, Walker and her colleagues screened the blood plasma of mice that had exercised on a running wheel in their cages for 4 days versus mice that had no wheel. The team identified 38 proteins whose levels increased after the workout. One in particular caught Walker's eye, a selenoprotein P, abbreviated SEPP1, selenium protein. This protein, which transports selenium to the brain and has antioxidant properties, more than doubled after the rodent's workout. Senior citizens, young and old, remember, working out has an extremely powerful benefit even on the cognitive brain. And it's not just it pumps more blood into the brain to bring you more oxygen to make you more able to focus or give you more attention abilities. No. It actually doubles the amount of selenium proteins in the brain that actually grow new neurons in the brain. How incredible is that? When the researchers injected sodium, selenite, which is a salt-based selenium, directly into the mouse's brain for 7 days, check this out. The number of neural precursor cells in the hippocampus part of the brain that controls learning and memory tripled. Could you imagine having triple the synapses in your brain to remember your family and loved ones' faces, their names? Selenium does that. Now, this was injecting selenium right into the brain. You do not need to do that. They just wanted to see what happened if they didn't feed it to the animal. They just injected it right in the brain. Will selenium have the same effect? They found the number of neural precursor cells, those stem cells that grow new neurons, tripled in the part of the brain that causes learning and memory. Is that not fascinating? Is that not incredible? It blew me away to read these studies. Mice genetically engineered. Watch this. They actually know how to clone and genetically engineer certain animals, mice in this case, mice that were genetically engineered to lack selenium proteins receptors got no boost in neural precursor cells with exercise alone. So they actually engineer and birth litter of pups of mice that do not have any selenium protein receptors in their brain, in the hippocampus, to even grow new neurons. But they made those mice exercise and they saw no boost, no increase in the stem cells that cause new neurons in the brain to grow. The team found confirming that selenium proteins was key to making the new neurons. So it wasn't just the exercise that did it. You needed the selenium proteins to do it. To find out whether selenium can help the aging brain, Walker's team added selenomethionine to the drinking water, another form of selenium, of 18-month-old mice, which is the equivalent of a 60-year-old human. Remember, I told you they study mice because they know the same thing's going to happen in a human. So they compare the aging of mice to humans 24/7. They compare the weights and ratios to humans, and then they start doing drug experiments, chemical experiments on all of them. And this is how they publish the results before they ever do a human trial. So for 60-year-old humans, they picked 18-month-old mice that are relatively the same age as a 60-year-old human. And after nearly 1 month, the number of new neurons in the rodents' hippocampus had doubled. How many of you believe that loved ones of yours or yourself could benefit with twice as many healthy brain cells to help you remember, calculate, walk, move, go to the bathroom, shower? All activities are controlled by the brain. And the nerves in your brain are called neurons. The selenium-treated mice also performed better than controls in 2 memory tasks that rely on the brain region. In the first one, the treated mice learned to avoid a place where they got a mild electric shock better than the other mice. In the second group, the team placed the mice in a brightly lit table with 32 holes, one of which holes allowed the animals to escape to a dark chamber. Mice instinctively avoid bright, open spaces. They note, using markings on the table as cues, the treated mice learned to escape twice as fast as the other mice. Well, you know what it makes me think of? What about senior citizens who are trying to get to the bathroom at night? You might want to try selenium. These mice were able to find even a dark space, find out where they're needing to go faster, twice as fast as those I know that are struggling in assisted living homes, nursing homes around the world. They injected a molecule into the mice's hippocampus to cause a stroke-like lesion. So now they're going to take mice and cause a stroke that destroys neurons and hurts memory. So everybody who's ever had a stroke, knows somebody with a stroke, this is who we're talking about. The lesioned but treated mice performed just as well as normal mice that never had a stroke on a suite of memory tasks. The untreated lesioned mice, those that did not get selenium supplement, on the other hand, failed to recognize objects as new, and they had a hard time remembering locations where they had received a shock the day before. A recent study showed clusterin, a molecule that also activates selenium protein receptors, is also elevated in the blood after physical activity in both mice and humans. Remember, if it happens in a mouse, it happens in a human. And it boosts memory. Quote, that makes this new paper even more exciting. Well, I mentioned at the beginning of this interview, at the beginning of this presentation, how excited I was to share this with you. It is mind-blowing what I learned and what these researchers learned about selenium. In this article in News Medical Life Sciences, selenium could boost learning and memory in aging brains. Queensland Brain Institute lead researcher Dr. Tara Walker said studies on the impact of exercise on the aging brain found levels of a protein that's key to transporting selenium in the blood were elevated by physical activity. And they state here, her quote, "We've known for the last 20 years that exercise can create new neurons in the brain, but we didn't really understand how. It's because of selenium." The research team investigated whether dietary selenium supplements could replicate the same effects as exercise. Pay attention, everybody. They know exercise increases the number of brain cells. Now they want to know, does selenium by itself do it? Because when they studied exercise, they found that all exercise was doing was increasing these proteins called selenoproteins that carry selenium to the brain. That's why they see new neurons in exercise. So now they want to know, well, what if we don't do the exercise and we just give them selenium? This is the next quote. "Our model showed that selenium supplementation could increase neuron generation and improve cognition, brain function in elderly mice. Remember, go to the drardisshow.com, get your selenium today." This is so incredible to me. I can't believe it, how excited and thrilled I am, because if I can improve the brain function of all humans around the world who are struggling so mightily, oh man, my life, my ability to sleep at night will be so much greater. Next quote, "When selenium supplements were given to mice, the productions of neurons increased, reversing the brain deficits observed in aging." I repeat, when selenium supplements were given to mice, which means if you give it to humans also, the productions of neurons increased, growing new brain cells, reversing, not stabilizing, reversing the cognitive deficits that are observed in aging. Young mice are really good at the learning and memory task, but after a stroke, they could no longer perform their tasks, Dr. Walker said, like so many humans after a stroke. "We found that learning and memory deficits of stroke-affected mice returned to normal when they were given selenium supplements." Get your selenium today at the Dr. Ardis Show. This is crazy and exciting. I could not believe I had never researched and dove into all of the neurological benefits of selenium. This just was astounding to me. Outside of the thyroid selenium benefits I've known about and read about and heard about at medical conventions for years, this was way more thrilling. Dr. Walker said the results opened a new therapeutic avenue to boost cognitive function in people who are unable to exercise due to poor health or old age. But in older people, particularly those with neurological conditions, selenium supplements could be beneficial. In the Cambridge University Press, they published this article that came from the British Journal of Nutrition. Nutritional status of selenium in Alzheimer's. Now, as a result of those previous studies where they're all talking about the benefits of mice and selenium and their brain function, then, of course, studies around the world in real-life humans with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and MS all started. They want to know, does selenium really help the human people too? Yep, it does. Nutritional status of selenium in Alzheimer's patients. They took 28, 11 males and 17 female, elderly diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. They said probable Alzheimer's disease. They've been given the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. AD means Alzheimer's disease. Participants were selected for the study according to the following inclusion parameters. They had to have these specific symptoms. They had to be exactly over 60 years old. They had to have absence of acute inflammation. They couldn't have any infection. They couldn't have a fever. They couldn't have diarrhea. They couldn't have cancer. They couldn't have diabetes. They couldn't have autoimmune disease. And they could not be taking a vitamin and mineral supplement. In the present study, 28 elderly in the Alzheimer's group and 29 healthy in the C group. Alzheimer's group is AD abbreviated. And then they took 29 healthy elderly women and men in the control group. Selenium levels in the plasma and erythrocyte is red blood cells, they state were higher in the C group. So selenium levels in the blood and red blood cells were significantly higher in the C group. C group was being the ones. Okay, we're going. There is no normal value ranges for selenium level in the nails, but higher levels in the C group were observed when compared with the Alzheimer's disease group. Now, I hope you're not being too confused here. They had they had humans who had Alzheimer's, and then they had a group of them that didn't. And they found that selenium levels in the C group, which were the control group who did not have Alzheimer's symptoms, they had significantly higher levels of selenium in their plasma and in their red blood cells. So let's keep going. And they found lower values inside of the Alzheimer's group. This is actually what they found and they published. Well, this is straight out of you'll see AD group, C group at the top, and then you'll see the average of their selenium loads there. Now we're going to dive into what they published because it's easier to read than sometimes these scientific tables. Higher selenium intake was observed in the C group, the control group, and it was adequate in 38% of the Alzheimer's disease group and in 63% of the control group. So they're telling you selenium intake, higher selenium intake was observed in the C group, control group, adequate, not high supplements of selenium. They just had adequate amounts of selenium in their body. The discussion states and notes, deficient selenium intake was observed in the most of the Alzheimer's disease patients. Between micronutrients and cognitive function, Smorgan is the researcher, observed that Alzheimer's disease patients showed lower plasma selenium when compared with control subjects who don't have Alzheimer's. Other studies noticed that selenium levels were positively correlated. So the higher the level of selenium, the higher the cognitive function, brain function in elderly patients. And thus, selenium deficiency could be a risk factor for Alzheimer's. Anybody out there worried about their loved ones who had Alzheimer's, that you might develop Alzheimer's because it's in your genes, you might inherit it? You might want to start supplementing selenium after you watch these next statements. Although the average plasma and erythrocyte red blood cell selenium concentrations in the Alzheimer's and in the C groups were below the recommended levels, individual values were significantly different in each group, revealing that Alzheimer's has an important role in selenium deficiency. So now they're going to blame Alzheimer's disease on causing the low levels of selenium. No, it's just the opposite. You haven't been taking selenium, therefore you now have Alzheimer's. And you're not eating the foods rich in selenium like Brazil nuts and others that protect you from developing Alzheimer's. The brain is the last organ to be depleted in selenium deficiency. And in repletion, it is the first one to establish adequate levels of selenium. So if you're not supplementing selenium, the brain's the first organ to start losing all of its selenium. But when you start supplementing selenium, the brain's the first organ to start receiving it. The main constituent is called selenoproteins in the brain. Selenium proteins. Glutathione peroxidase, that destroys other stuff in the body, is an essential line of defense against free radicals, acting against hydrogen peroxide and lipid peroxidation. So as the cells in your body produce hydrogen peroxide to kill bacteria, viruses, funguses, and parasites and venoms, glutathione goes and actually destroys the hydrogen peroxide because they don't want to get it out of control. It's very acidic. And thus, glutathione protects the brain against oxidative stress, which has a central role in Alzheimer's disease. Besides selenoprotein P, selenium protein, which is synthesized or made at the brain level, and it protects the brain against oxidative damage, is the most important selenoprotein for cerebral functions, cerebral being brain functions. Thus, selenium may affect the rate of disease via protection against redox oxidative species, oxidative stress. ROS is what they call it. Oxidative stress has been an important role in Alzheimer's disease processes. Thus, the relationship between selenium and Alzheimer's could have two meanings. Selenium could be depleted owing to the oxidation that accompanies aging and Alzheimer's progression. And change in selenium levels could be the first event in relation to dietary intake. If you start eating the selenium, it might be the first thing that improves to improve Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease patients, all of them, showed lower selenium levels, although a selenium deficiency was also observed in the control group. Thus, we can suggest that the oxidative stress that is present in Alzheimer's disease has an association with selenium deficiency observed in the present Alzheimer's disease patients. Well, if oxidative stress is what's to blame, listeners, viewers, that means glutathione, which is an antioxidant, and vitamin C should be things you would consider to be supplementing along with selenium to protect your body's ability to hold on to the selenium you're supplementing and protect you from Alzheimer's. Now let's dive into this research study called Nutrients. Remember, don't get too overwhelmed here. I just have to show audiences and people around the world what researchers around the world in labs are proving are the benefits of nutrition in every medical disease on earth, because your medical doctors aren't reading these research studies. So they're not going to tell you anything about this. In fact, if you asked your doctor right now, do you think this selenium supplement would help my grandmother with Alzheimer's? They're going to say no. Well, I'm going to show you all the published, peer-reviewed, published research studies that actually prove they should be taking selenium, and selenium does work. But instead, what are they going to prescribe you? Drugs for those diseases. All right, so in the research study called Nutrients, how many MDs do you think are reading that one? 0. The effects of selenium supplementation in patients with mild cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's disease. Let's see what they discovered and what you're about to learn. Selenium is essential for human health because it is part of selenium proteins, which participate in antioxidant and anti-inflammatory pathways. Any of you living in pain and inflammation, selenium reduces that. It's anti-inflammatory, like nicotine. Selenium is pivotal for human development and plays a significant role in the central nervous system. Several studies in rodents have demonstrated that the depletion of some selenium proteins, such as selenoprotein P, causes irreversible brain damage, predisposition to seizures, impaired motor coordination, and cognitive decline. I repeat this last statement. Several studies in mice, which if it happens in a mouse, it will happen in a human. Remember, have demonstrated that low levels of selenium proteins cause irreversible brain damage. That doesn't sound good. It's also low level of selenium causes a predisposition for people to have seizures of every kind. If you have a loved one with seizures, you might want to get them selenium. Impaired motor coordination, Parkinson's maybe, Alzheimer's, MS, and cognitive decline, early onset dementia, memory loss. The objective of this systemic review and meta-analysis was to evaluate the effects of selenium supplementation on selenium levels in the blood and on oxidative stress, as well as to verify whether selenium supplemented improves patient performance in cognitive tests, brain tests. Well, let's see what they discovered. So these researchers are going to look at every research study that's published in the medical literature, in scientific literature, where they studied selenium's effect on mice and humans. And they want to know if any of those studies were evaluating the subjects were swallowing selenium. They wanted to know what the results were of all those studies. To see, is there an overall accepted now view that selenium is beneficial as supplemented? All right, so there's a few acronyms. We'll take this slowly. There's a few acronyms they're going to use in reference to all these studies on selenium. So they did a meta-analysis. The acronym PICO, P-I-C-O. The P equals patients with Alzheimer's, or MCI. If you don't know what MCI means, it means mild cognitive impairment. So P in PICO corresponds to patients with Alzheimer's or mild cognitive impairment. That's what P in PICO means. The I means supplementation with either organic or inorganic selenium, isolated or in combination with other compounds, other nutrients. This is important. So they're telling you we're going to look into these 4 areas. We want to know, first, identify in these studies, patients that they're studying have Alzheimer's or mild cognitive impairment. They have to be taking a supplement that's either organic or inorganic selenium. To make this clear for everybody at home, organic would be it came from a plant. The selenium was extracted from a plant and put in a supplement. Inorganic means it was synthetically made by man, but it is selenium. No different than like diamonds. They now make fake diamonds called cubic zirconium. but it's very hard to tell the difference. You can create a synthetic form of almost anything chemists have figured out. In the acronym PICO, C equals patients who are not taking selenium supplementation or who received a placebo. And O is improvement in cognitive performance and or selenium availability. So that's what PICO is. PICO is patients. I is they are supplementing with selenium of any kind. C is patients are not taking any selenium. And the O is they are seeing improvements in cognitive performance. In this study, they found 1,350 scientific papers were collected from 4 different electronic databases. This resulted in a total of 11 papers that were included in this review because they included the PICO metrics. 4 of these papers explored only selenium supplementation, and 7 explored selenium plus other nutrients being supplemented. So picture a multivitamin or multimineral. So 7 of the papers explored selenium with other nutrients, so a multivitamin with selenium in it. 4 of the 11 research papers, it was actually doing studies on just taking selenium. I couldn't believe it when I read the results of this review, by the way. Of those 11 papers, 6 were used in this research papers review right now that you're about to go through with me. In section 3.3, among the studies exploring supplementation only with selenium, they were included in the systemic review. 60% included patients with Alzheimer's disease, and 40% of those studies had patients with mild cognitive impairment. What's an example of mild cognitive impairment? Not remembering a phone number, not remembering your loved one's name, not remembering a birthday of a loved one. Among the studies of selenium plus other nutrient supplementation, so they found studies with selenium and a multivitamin. Included in this review, 87% of those participants in those studies did have Alzheimer's disease already, and 12.5% had mild cognitive impairment. And that's all they're wanting to look for. Alzheimer's disease, mild cognitive impairment, and studies with selenium being supplemented. In the systematically selected papers that evaluated the effects of only selenium supplementation, some studies performed supplementation with the inorganic form of selenium, 40% of the studies. Others were with the organic form from plants, 40%, and others didn't specify the kind of selenium they used. You'll see here, they're giving you the percentages of the papers they're looking at studying Alzheimer's disease, mild cognitive impairment with supplement from selenium. And they show you the blue bar graph represents how many papers were done and how many patients had Alzheimer's disease or mild cognitive impairment that were taking selenium supplement from inorganic, organic, or just not identified. The range of selenium in the plasma before supplementation on average was 49.9 to 62.3 per micrograms per liter of blood. So just look at the numbers. I'm going to show you a table here that'll make this easier, but I have to show you this because as we read these statements, it just drives home how incredible selenium is. These numbers are astounding. In fact, they're astounding when they compare them to selenium supplemented by itself versus selenium being in a multivitamin. The range of selenium in plasma before supplementation was 49.9 to 6.2 micrograms per liter of blood. And it increased to 246 to 315 micrograms per liter after selenium supplementation alone. That is a huge jump. The range of selenium in your serum, the blood as a whole, was 122 to 145 on average, and increased up to 176 to up to 858 micrograms per liter after selenium supplementation alone. Only selenium. The range of selenium in red blood cells was 59.5 to 65 micrograms per liter of blood, and increased, read it, 517 to 640 micrograms per liter after selenium supplementation alone. Finally, the range of selenium in the cerebral spinal fluid in your brain was 1.4 to 1.6 before supplementing with selenium, and it increased by double to 2.5 and over to 20.2 micrograms per liter after selenium supplementation. That was only with selenium being supplemented, nothing else. Those ranges are massive. Those changes are humbling. Now, if we go to the next part, it says, in fact, the meta-analysis revealed that selenium supplementation significantly increased selenium levels by an average of 4 times in plasma, 1.88 times in serum, your blood, more than 3.73 times in red blood cells, and 2.5 times in the cerebral spinal fluid. When you look at plasma, I'm going to show you on the table here, you'll see boxes on columns titled post-intervention and the baseline. Baseline means when they started the study, they took the plasma and measured how much selenium was in their plasma. And then after the research study with supplementing selenium, they're measuring selenium in the same plasma post-intervention. So just pay attention to those two columns. Mean, M-E-A-N, means average. So the baseline average for selenium in the plasma before was 49.9 in one study, 59 in another study, 52, 62, 50, 59, and 56 in the plasma in all those research studies, the 6 they included, or 7. And then you'll see that after they supplemented only selenium, you see the average selenium in the plasma just skyrocket from 49 at beginning to 246, and from 59 to 315, 52 to 299. The next study was 62 to 274. The next one was 50 to 312, 59 to 277, 56 to 290. Every single study, not an average of all the studies, every single study, when you supplemented with just selenium, which is what we have at the Dr. Ardis Show in our capsules, when they supplemented with that, you see this massive jump in the plasma in every single study. When they looked at the studies that just looked at your blood with selenium levels, they also looked at the baseline at the beginning of the study and then what happened afterwards. And what did they find? The average selenium level in the blood starting in these studies was at 122. It jumped to 176. And then in the blood, they looked back in the other study and it was 145 at the beginning of the study, but it jumped to 858 just supplementing with selenium alone. The red blood cells that need selenium also, they looked at before and after. And what did they find? The first study listed found selenium in red blood cells was 59 measured. At the end of the study, just supplementing selenium, it went to 574. The next study was 85. It jumped to 519. 56 was the next study. It jumped to 606 in the red blood cells. Then it went from 63 in the next study to 517. It went from 57 to 607. Then it went from 61 to 640. It went from 58 to 536. It wasn't the average of all the studies. They saw a subtle improvement in selenium levels when supplementing selenium. They see in every single study, every aspect of the blood and your cerebral spinal fluid that your brain sits inside of, they saw massive increases every single time in every single study in the blood and the improvements just supplementing selenium. Now let's get to the brain fluid. This is where they said they saw it double. So the average cerebral spinal fluid amount of selenium was 1.6 and 1.4. The first study, it jumped from 1.6 when people were just taking selenium. They saw it jump to 2.5. That was almost double. But the other study, it went from 1.4 to 20.2. That is a massive increase in selenium in the brain, which you just learned is published to improve Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Well, you're going to read about Parkinson's here in a minute, but Alzheimer's. Oxidative stress, after they've done all this review of these research studies on selenium in humans, oxidative stress is involved in cognitive decline, and studies have shown that patients with mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease present higher levels of reactive species, oxidative stress, which culminate in the oxidative stress process. Selenium intake can improve normal cellular function by reducing pro-oxidant molecules and by increasing antioxidant levels in your brain. You know what else is amazing about selenium, everybody? Remember the periodic table of elements you learned about when you were a kid in chemistry or in science or were homeschooled and saw the periodic table of elements for the first time? Do you know that if you see on the periodic table of elements, which we were told represents all the elements that make up the human body and all of life on Earth and in the universe, did you know that selenium's in the periodic table of elements? It's abbreviated SE, just like you see on the screen. In the included papers, I need y'all to pay attention to this. This is incredible. When we talked about the test results and score results for evaluating cognitive function, in the included papers, the research studies they were reviewing for this research study, they realized only selenium supplementation. The cognitive tests performed were controlled oral word association test, verbal fluency called COAT. Constructural praxis is another study or testing. And then another test called mini mental state examination and Alzheimer's disease assessment scale cognitive subscale. That test is called ADOS-COG or ADOS-COG, just so you know what they were looking at. In the selenium supplemented group only, those only taking selenium, not in a multivitamin, it is possible to observe that the MMSE score, the mini mental state examination score, increased from 10.4 to 19.7. That was before taking the supplement, and it increased after selenium to 19.5 to 20 after selenium supplementation. In the Alzheimer's COAT test analysis before supplementation, the ranges were 12.8 to 25 of selenium. Oh, sorry. The scores were 12.8 to 25. And after taking selenium, they went from 12.8 to 14 all the way up to 20. In the ADOS-COG Alzheimer's test, they found that before supplementation, it was 19.0, and after the supplementation, it increased to 22.3. Any improvement in mental function is a plus for any Alzheimer's patient. And in the constructional praxis test, the score before supplementation was 7.9, and after taking the supplement, it increased to 9.2. Everybody out there seeing a neurologist, please make sure they have this information because they should be giving every single patient that they're dealing with and testing to evaluate the scores and severity of their neurological disease and Alzheimer's diagnosis will be improved with selenium supplementation alone. In the selenium plus other nutrients, the multivitamin supplemented group, it is possible to observe that the MMSE score increased from 9.5 at the beginning all the way up to 10.4 and 24.3 respectively. I want you to recognize these numbers. 9.4 to 10.4 and 23.8 to 24.3 after supplementation. That is barely any improvement compared to the selenium alone group. In the ADOS-COG testing scores before supplementation with the multivitamin that included selenium, their scores were 1.6 to 25.9, and after supplementation, they only went up to 1.7 and 25.9. It didn't even change for that score. So I just want you to understand the selenium supplement by itself was actually way better. I mean, multiples better than taking a multivitamin with selenium, which is why I have selenium all by itself at the Dr. Aardis Show. There's a reason why I do what I do. Selenium is an essential nutrient element for the maintenance of mammal life and a component of selenium proteins, which are part of the endogenous antioxidant system. The brain is particularly dependent on selenium supply and is spared from selenium deficiency. Cardoso and his colleagues demonstrated that patients with Alzheimer's disease had significantly lower levels of selenium in their blood, their red blood cells, compared to age-matched healthy controls. Age-matched. So they took Alzheimer's disease patients, got the average of their age, and then looked at healthy people that didn't have Alzheimer's disease at the same age groups. And they found those that didn't have Alzheimer's had much higher levels of selenium. Those with Alzheimer's had all categories of lower selenium. Reddy et al. Showed a decrease in circulatory, red blood cells, and cerebral spinal fluid selenium levels in patients with Alzheimer's disease also. For the first time, our study demonstrated through a systematic review and a meta-analysis the possible benefits of selenium supplementation on selenium levels in patients with mild cognitive impairment or Alzheimer's disease, as well as on markers of oxidative stress and on cognitive test performance. According to the Food and Nutrition Board at the Institute of Medicine of the National Academies of the USA, it is recommended that people aged older than 14 years old ingest 55 micrograms of selenium a day. Importantly, they say the normal blood level of selenium ranges in adults from 70 to 130 micrograms per liter. And the daily selenium ingestion threshold, they say, should not exceed 400 micrograms because high doses, they say, of selenium can be toxic to the body. I want y'all to know, looking at that, they tell you that they said that the threshold is 400 micrograms of selenium a day. Well, I want you to know, in our selenium capsules at the Dr. Artist Show, there's 200 micrograms per capsule. So if you're going to follow the recommendation from this, it would be 2 capsules a day for everybody you know who has Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, or MS. 2 capsules would equal 400 micrograms. I do have more to say about the dosage at the end of this presentation, though. Actually, I'll go ahead and say it now. 2 years ago, I did an interview with a guy out of South Africa who's a world's expert on selenium. And he talked about these doses, saying that the FDA right now says the maximum people should take every day is 200 micrograms, which is what's in each capsule of our selenium. Here, they're telling you in the research studies that in humans, over 400 micrograms, which is double what the FDA says, above 400 is the toxic dose. So up to 400 is fine. Well, I want you to know, if you remember the podcast I did a couple years ago, we found out that selenium is safely and adequately taken for all human beings on Earth up to 3 times this 400 microgram dose. So if you tripled that 400 microgram dose you see on the screen, it would be 1.2 milligrams, which would be 6 of our selenium capsules. And there are some people I do recommend to them. Always consult your medical professional if you want to, and you should probably. At least that's what they tell you to do. I'm just telling you right now, I'm showing you the research studies. The research proves that these doses are safe. 200 micrograms per capsule, 400 per capsule, but you can take up to 6 of those a day based on the severity of your symptoms. It's already been proven around the world. We talked about that 2 years ago. So I have had many, many people take up to 600 micrograms, 800 milligrams based on their cognitive impairment. And for you, I'll just say, all these research studies are showing up to 400 micrograms benefits all of these scores. In our study, we observed that in many of the studies that evaluated selenium levels before selenium supplementation, Alzheimer's and mild cognitive impaired individuals had selenium levels below the ideal blood levels. After supplementing just selenium, levels of selenium increased in various tissues. In fact, the analysis of all these studies revealed an increase in plasma, blood, red blood cell, and cerebral spinal fluid selenium levels. The MMSE score for cognitive performance is used as a screening test and also as a tool to evaluate Alzheimer's progression. So if you have a loved one that has Alzheimer's, your neurologist is doing these tests on them. And this is to assess their spatial awareness and temporal orientation, immediate and recall of memory, calculations, comprehension, writing, and drawing. The MMS test score increases with better patient performance. So the higher the score, it means they're having a better performance. What's so important about that? Cardosa et al., the researcher, demonstrated that individuals with Alzheimer's who received a supranutritional amount, a high amount of selenium, demonstrated a subtle but significant improvement in all MMSE scores, which was associated with an increase in cerebral spinal fluid selenium levels. Moreover, Cardosa observed that individuals with mild cognitive impairment who daily supplemented with selenium through Brazil nut intake demonstrated positive responses to certain cognitive functions, such as verbal fluency, that means storing capacity of words, the ability to retrieve information stored in your memory, and processing of executive functions, and constructive praxis to assess an individual's motor skills, visuospatial skills, and visio-constructive skills. What does that look like? You ever seen somebody go like this? Take your finger, point it out, and touch your nose without, just take your finger and bring it to the tip of your nose. That's visuospatial awareness, visual spatial awareness. When selenium supplementation was associated with other nutrients, patients with Alzheimer's also demonstrated a small improvement in memory performance. Remember the study I just showed you? When they put it in a multivitamin, they saw some small improvements in memory performance, but the majority of all improvements was greater with just supplements of selenium alone. Oxidative stress is involved in cognitive decline. Studies have shown that patients with MCI and Alzheimer's present higher levels of reactive species, which culminate in disease processes. Selenium intake, these researchers say, can improve normal cellular function by reducing inflammatory molecules and increasing antioxidant levels in the brain, thus reducing neurofibrillary aggregations, and achieving better cognitive performances. You've heard of amyloid plaques. That's your neurofibrillary aggregations. Amyloid plaques in Alzheimer's, MS, you name it. Their conclusions of this study, medical journals. Selenium supplementation is a good alternative for alleviating some of the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease and mild cognitive impairment, such as decreased selenium levels and GPX activity and cognitive deficits. In summary, systematically selected studies demonstrated in every single one of them improvements in all parameters as a result of selenium supplementation. How about the plasma selenium over time and the cognitive decline in the elderly people only? Let's look at that study. One leading cause of cognitive impairment is an increase in brain oxidative stress. Selenium, an antioxidant, and a main constituent of brain selenium proteins, may be particularly important for the maintenance of brain functions. Selenium glutathione peroxidase constituents, and it constitutes an important line of defense against free radicals and against hydrogen peroxide and fat breakdown. However, the most important selenium protein for cerebral functions is probably selenium protein, P. This protein is created at the cerebral level in the brain and protects the brain against oxidative damage, particularly peroxynitrite. You've heard of nitrites and nitrates in hot dogs and other processed meats and how bad they can be for you. Selenoproteins protect against that. Furthermore, selenium status decreases with age. Only one study has investigated the relationship between longitudinal cognitive decline and baseline selenium levels. The highest declines in cognitive functions were associated with the lowest plasma selenium concentrations at baseline. I repeat, the highest declines in brain function were associated with the lowest levels of selenium in the blood. Subjects who currently used antioxidant supplements, vitamin C, E, A, and selenium or zinc, had a lower risk of cognitive decline than those that were non-users. I mentioned vitamin C earlier as an antioxidant. There you see the evidence again. We investigated the relationships between short-term selenium changes, the first 2 years, and then long-term selenium changes over a 9-year period, and cognitive changes during that 9-year follow-up of the EVA study. EVA stands for Étude du something in French. I don't know what that says. All you French fluent people, you know how to read that. Tell your buddies, I don't know how to say it. Even though I took French for 4 years in high school, I only remember a couple things. I remember ice cream, which was le glace, and I remember le beefsteak, which was steak. All right, so I don't know French. In this French study, a 9-year longitudinal study with 6 waves of follow-up. So there was a 9-year review and study of individuals in France, and they wanted to check in those 9 years 6 different points of reference. During the first 2 years, from 1991 to 1993, 1,389 volunteers, 574 men, 815 women, born between 1922 and 1932, and these people had to be residing in the town of Nantes. I probably screwed that up. Nantes, Western France, were recruited for this study. The study population at baseline had been previously described. Characteristics of the 702 subjects who completed the 9-year follow-up were compared with the 607 who did not, which included 101 deaths. And those are reported in Table 1, they say. So here's Table 1. So at baseline, they're looking at these groups. So did they have, this is just some of the things they were looking for. Did these people have diabetes? What was the percentage? Did they drink alcohol? Are they smokers? Did they go to high school? Are they men, women? What's the percentages? Did they have hypertension, high blood pressure, high cholesterol? Were their MMSE scores lower than 25th percentile for each of the next 4, 5 tests they're listing? So, and then BMIs, what were they? Their average age? What was their average selenium levels? Well, you'll see there for men and women, it was 1.1 and 1.09, which is basically 1.1. All right, so what they observed was a decrease of plasma selenium over the entire follow-up period. The average selenium declined 0.055 at 2 years, and then it declined even further at 0.096 at the 9-year follow-up. And then they stated, we noted an increase in cognitive performances averages. To assess the short and long-term association between selenium and brain changes, we performed linear regression models between the 2-year and 9-year selenium change, and the cognitive changes that they evaluated at year 2, 4, 6, and 9 of that same 9-year period. And they show you the scores here, 2-year change, 9-year change. These are just for your reference. I'm not going to go through them. Then they showed the linear regression models for these, for those nerds out there that like to read tables. The association between 2-year selenium changes and 9-year cognitive changes, they just want to see what's the difference over a 9-year period in the selenium levels in the blood, and what's the difference in their cognitive function over the 9-year period. Using crude mixed models, by the first 2-year selenium change, there was no association with the 4 cognitive tests. They didn't see a decrease in selenium in the first 2 years, causing a change in the test scores. These results confirmed in the multivariate models, and they show you those results within 2 years. Now they're going to go into the 9 years. For these analyses, we considered cognitive and selenium variables simultaneously measured at inclusion at 2 years and 9 years. In these mixed models, cognitive performances were related to selenium levels and time of follow-up. So as it went past 2 years, they saw that at every part they measured, they saw that the selenium levels directly correlated to cognitive function. We observed the probability of cognitive decline, increased decline of brain function with the decrease of selenium change over time. Among subjects who had a decrease of their blood selenium levels, the higher the decrease of plasma selenium, the higher the probability of cognitive decline. Among subjects who had an increase of their blood selenium levels, the probability of cognitive decline was higher in subjects with the smallest selenium increase. Plasma selenium change was associated with MMSE decline, the measurement of cognitive function. So as selenium went down, so did MMSE decline, testing results. Declines in selenium were associated with cognitive decline as measured by 4 neuropsychological tests, MMSE, DSS, FTT, and TMTB, after controlling for potential confounders. So looking at every other factor, they saw that declines in selenium was the #1 cause for the decline over the 9 years in cognitive test results. Our results suggest that blood plasma selenium decrease is associated with cognitive decline. The real importance of selenium in the brain and the capacity of the brain to manage selenium depletion is just the beginning to be explored. Molecular biology has recently contributed to the recognition of selenium and selenium-dependent enzymes as modulators of brain function. Our results, together with information on involvement of selenium proteins and brain function, support possible relationships between selenium status and neuropsychological functions in aging people. I'm talking to all you aging people. The importance of selenium and selenium proteins for brain function, from antioxidant protection to neural signaling. This is from the Journal of Inorganic Biochemistry. Notice it's not organic, inorganic biochemistry. Underneath the section 5, a considerable body of knowledge concerning selenium functions in the brain was acquired through studying of its relationship to neurodegeneration, disease process, concerning both detrimental and its beneficial aspects. Neurodegenerative disorders such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and ALS, and Huntington disease pose a considerable threat to human health. Selenium proteins are involved in reducing oxidative stress. I just repeat that over and over and over in these studies. The brain is susceptible to oxidative stress due to low level of antioxidants, high content of polyunsaturated fatty acids, and increased oxygen demand. Thus, neuroprotective properties of selenium may comprise of antioxidant selenoproteins. May comprise, that was bad. Thus, neuroprotective properties of selenium may comprise of antioxidant selenoproteins, manufacturing, stimulation. Selenium is an antioxidant, so it can protect against all these conditions. Selenium deficiency in Alzheimer's. You see Alzheimer's at the top of the screen. Selenium deficiency seems detrimental in Alzheimer's disease. For instance, more than a 2-fold increase in the total area of amyloid plaques in Alzheimer's was observed in selenium deficient mice compared to the selenium adequate ones. Oh my God, there's less plaques, amyloid plaques in the brain of Alzheimer's patients who take selenium. Salt selenium decreased amyloid levels in neuronal cell cultures by 20 and 15%, respectively, inhibiting amyloidogenic beta and Y secretases that create amyloid plaques. Did you know selenium prevents the production of the components that make amyloid plaques? Selenium administration per body weight also caused amelioration or dissolved all cognitive deficits, oxidative damage, and morphological changes, physical changes in the parts of the brain called the hippocampus and the cerebral cortex, the parts that control memory and learning. Authors reported a strong link between selenium protein expression and pathological hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease, and indicated direct interaction of selenium proteins and other molecules involved in the Alzheimer's disease process. Selenium protein upregulation may be related directly to its antioxidant properties or to its increased demand for selenium in the Alzheimer's diseased brain. Salt selenium, selectively activated serine threonine phosphatase, which had a consequential impact on dephosphorylating tau protein, which, by the way, none of you understand, and that's okay. It improved spatial memory in the Alzheimer's disease mice model. Selenium did. Contextual memory and motor performance improvements were also observed. Jones, another researcher, reported that treatment of human neuroblastoma cells, tumor cells, with selenium significantly reduced levels of what's called phosphorylated tau proteins, which lead to this form of tumor, and also resulted in increased protection against seizures in rodent models. If selenium helps against seizures in rodents, it's going to help with human beings who have seizures also. I highlighted it for you. There's so many millions of people struggling with seizures right now. Increased protection with selenium prevents seizures. What about Parkinson's disease? Several findings suggest an involvement of selenium proteins in preserving the what's called the area nigrostriatal pathways. I'm going to explain to you what that is here in just a second and show you. Substantia nigra and putamen have higher selenium concentrations compared to other brain regions. All right. Now, this is in the Parkinson's disease section. So let's read the first highlighted sentence again. Several findings suggest an involvement of selenium proteins in preserving what's called the nigrostriatal pathway. What is that? Well, this is what it is. Nigrostriatal pathway. It is a bilateral dopamine pathway in the brain that connects the substantia nigra pars compacta, a part of the brain, in the midbrain, with another part of the brain called dorsal striatum, which is in your forebrain. It is one of the four major dopamine pathways in the brain, this nigrostriatal pathway. And all of you know who have loved ones with Parkinson's, the impact of dopamine in Parkinson's, because the majority of people on Parkinson's are put on drugs called dopa drugs, dopamine drugs like L-Dopa, Cardopa. They're all named after the dopamine they're trying to put in your body and control. So I just want to remind you that in the brain, it is one of the four major dopamine pathways in the brain, and it is critical in the production of movement as a part of the system called the basal ganglia motor loop that controls coordinated function of all your body parts, arms, legs, face, name it. And they publish further down in the next paragraph, degeneration of dopamine neurons in these parts of the brain is one of the main pathological features of Parkinson's disease, leading to a marked reduction in dopamine function. And the symptomatic motor deficits of Parkinson's disease, including hypokinesia, not being able to move well, tremors, rigidity, and postural imbalance. If you know anybody struggling with balance issues, Parkinson's, tremors, whether or not, it doesn't matter, put them on selenium. These two researchers, Imam and Ali, found increased chemical damage to dopaminergic terminals in mice and Parkinson's disease model for selenium-deficient animals. Langer observed bradykinesia and DNA damage reduction in paraquat Parkinson's models in rats receiving selenium supplementation as selenium in drinking water. They saw reduction in bradykinesia and DNA damage by just putting selenium in the water. What about ALS? Anybody out there know anybody with Lou Gehrig's disease called ALS? In the lab studies in human myeloid cells showed that low concentrations of selenium counteracted oxidative stress-induced cell death by inhibiting disease redox oxidative stress production and supporting the antioxidant pathways. What about other neurological disorders? Some epidemiological disease data, indicated that selenium deficient regions might be associated with higher incidence of schizophrenia. Did you know that? Anybody out there with a loved one with delusions, hallucinations, maybe you're going to be diagnosed with schizophrenia? It's now a long COVID diagnosis, by the way, schizophrenia. You might want to get on selenium. Huntington's disease model reported beneficial output from selenium supplementation in mice. Traumatic head injuries, a contribution of selenium to the reduction of the death of cells and the prevention of nerve cell death in the cortex and hippocampus was observed with selenium. Selenium reduced glutamate and hypoxia, induced redox oxidative stress production in these cells, and it increased the levels of mitochondrial biogenesis factored following brain cell injury. Finally, antioxidant and anti-apoptotic effect, cell death effect of selenium in the central nervous system gained much attention in relationship to selenium's protective properties against a number of neurotoxicants. Did you know methylmercury, mercury found in some of the shots? Did you know that methylmercury is protected by selenium? Did you know selenium helps protect against mercury poisoning in the brain? Did you know they also say it's been proven selenium helps protect against lead poisoning in the brain, in the body? Did you know selenium was proven to help protect against these other chemicals, methamphetamines, 2 of them, and then something called butyl hydroperoxide and dicarboxylic acid? Did you know that selenium protected against these toxic metals and poisons in the brain? Steinbrenner and Size reviewed a potential role of selenium and selenium proteins in counteracting ammonia toxicity in liver hepatic encephalopathy, liver-induced brain swelling. Selenium protects against that. Selenium also has multiple interactions with different layers of the central nervous system. Its homeostasis and regulation results in its complicated role in the pathology of diverse neurological disorders. This may include participation in motor performance, coordination, memory, and cognition. Selenium helps with all those. Research publications connected the role of selenium in brain signaling increased in the recent 5 years owing to murine, which is the fancy word for mice, research. These are just a few of the research studies. In case you're wondering, is there any other proof besides this podcast? These are all research studies proving and finding that selenium supplementation improves all neurological functions in humans and animals. It ain't a few, it is a lot. So if you guys would like to go beyond the podcast and go do your own research studies, here they are. Screenshot them. Go look them up on pubmed.gov. They just keep coming. There's a bunch of them. Castano, a researcher, reported an increase in both dopamine and serotonin turnover in the prefrontal cortex of rats fed selenium. Oh my goodness. All of you that are told you need to be on an antidepressant because you have low serotonin levels, did you know selenium can reverse it? Not only Parkinson's, but antidepressants can be totally taken off and you don't need them anymore. Selenium can reverse Parkinson's symptoms and be an antidepressant. Selenium supplementation was found to be protective to the dopamine neurons and upregulated GPX activity. Noteworthy, this is in accordance with Parkinson's disease findings. Recently, Seher observed cholinergic neuron loss in the neuron-specific knockout mice. They engineered mice to not have these specific neurons. And according to them, lower doses of selenium restored acetylcholine esterase activity, reduced glutathione and ATP level in the rat model of Alzheimer's diseases, and also improved their cognition. The most transparent mechanism of selenium's role in your brain is selenium's protection in the redox regulation, reducing oxidative stress. Finally, selenium might indirectly influence glutamatergic transmission through GABA mechanisms, which is important. GABA is important when you're looking at Alzheimer's, MS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and Alzheimer's. And they're looking at GABA and its interaction with zinc-dependent signaling pathways along with selenium. This is what selenium does in the body. If you'd like to spend some time trying to, fry your brain, trying to make sense of science and infographics out of a research study, you see selenium at the top. It turns into selenium proteins, and then it goes off into these various areas to help reduce inflammation, improve ion channel function, reduce protein phosphorylation, reduce oxidative stress and reduce protein folding, which is what causes prion diseases, which are deadly 100%. Indirect interactions of selenium with the brain signaling pathways, and its signaling modulates inflammation, reduces inflammation, and participation in neuronal metabolism, the death of neurons at the levels of ion channels, and protein phosphorylation seems possible. In the journal Cell Metabolism, this research study titles, Selenium mediates exercise-induced adult nerve growth and reverses learning deficits that are induced by hippocampal injury, brain injury, and aging. So selenium actually handles exercise-induced adult and improves adult exercised nerve growth in the brain and reverses learning deficits that are induced by injury to the brain and by aging. At the top, you'll see they have a running mouse, or they have a running mouse, exercising mouse that they're studying, or a selenium supplemented diet mice they're studying. So they have exercise mice and mice that are not exercising and only taking selenium. And you'll see in the nerves, the drawing in the middle, you'll see SEPP1, that's the selenium proteins in the nerves. And then at the bottom, you see an increase in spatial memory in both rats that are exercising and those that are taking selenium. Our data show that an exercise-induced increase in antioxidant selenium transport activates hippocampal NPCs, resulting in increased NPC proliferation, neurological proliferation, new nerves in the brain, and adult nerve growth. Furthermore, we show that mimicking the exercise-induced increase in systemic selenium transport by dietary selenium supplementation can restore nerve growth and reverse cognitive decline associated with aging and injury to the hippocampal injury part of the brain. NPCs, in case you don't know what that means, NPC stands for nasopharyngeal carcinoma. This is a brain tumor or a head tumor. Nasopharyngeal carcinoma. So now that you know this is a cancer they're talking about, let's read it again. Our data showed that an exercise-induced increase in antioxidant selenium, so when you exercise, selenium goes up, transport activates quiescent hippocampal nasopharyngeal carcinomas, resulting in increased NPC proliferation and adult nerve growth. Furthermore, they state, we show that mimicking the exercise-induced increase in systemic selenium by supplementing selenium can restore normal nerve growth and reverse the cognitive decline associated with aging and hippocampal injury. These people decided, we proposed that exercise-induced selenium release contributes to our previously identified oxidative stress mediated mechanism of exercise-induced activation of quiescent carcinomas. In this study, we found that selenium activates the same population of NPCs as norepinephrine, further characterizing these people with this actual type of carcinoma. Our finding that selenium transport mediates exercise-induced NPC activation, therefore identified the norepinephrine response population as the one that is activated in response to exercise. Selenium is important for maintaining normal brain function, and its deficiency has been linked to a number of age-related neurodegenerative disorders, including Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and Huntington disease. In this study, we showed that selenium supplementation can rescue the decreased part of the brain that controls memory and recall. It can rescue the decreased nerve growth and associated learning and memory deficits in animal models of those that are physiologically aging and induced hippocampal lesions, in which the cognitive deficits have also been shown to be rescued by physical exercise. We found that although NPC proliferation, this carcinoma, was greatly reduced in the aged hippocampus, the magnitude of selenium-induced activation was greater in older mice than young mice. Overall, our finding that selenium metabolism involved in mediating the exercise-induced increase in this neurogenesis demonstrates how systemic or environmental factors can regulate adult brain nerve cell growth. Dietary selenium, which could be used to mimic the beneficial effects of exercise on cognitive function, given that selenium is a cheap, readily available dietary supplement that is found in a number of commonly eaten foods, such as nuts, grains, and dietary products. It could be easily boosted in the diet of elderly people. And we conclude, this is particularly important for the treatment of individuals who are unable to exercise due to advanced age, frailty, or disability. This is why selenium, from the Dr. Ardis Show, we recommend everybody supplement, even in those who can't move a lot, can't exercise a lot due to disability or old age or frailty. This is our selenium product. At the Dr. Ardis Show, you'll see the subtitle on the label reads Essential Minerals for Immunity, Thyroid, and Heart Health. And now you're learning brain health. You'll see selenium, 200 micrograms there, accompanied with green pea powder, lentil powder, millet powder, and chlorophyll. These are all necessary nutrients found in plants that help restore and heal the human body, including the brain. Remember, our new book, Moving Beyond the COVID-19 Lies, is breaking records all over Amazon. BarnesandNoble.com is ordering books for all their stores in the country. Public libraries, over 100 of them now, are ordering copies. It's been very exciting to watch the actual reaction to this book, Moving Beyond the COVID-19 Lies, Restoring Health and Hope for Humanity. In fact, I'd like to thank Coast to Coast Radio that had me on. I'd like to thank Coast to Coast Radio, who had me on their show last Sunday. This is actually being filmed in November of 2024, but they're large, trusted audiences for the last 30-something years. They had me on for a 2-hour interview, 1 hour to discuss the book, and then do a 1-hour Q&A live with their audiences. I want to thank them and their production team and all those who listened and were able to download that. If you weren't able to listen to it, you can find that at Coast to Coast Radio online. I'm Dr. Bryant Ardis. This is the benefits of selenium. If you're not taking selenium, I take selenium every single day. I've been doing it for 20 years. You should too. God bless you. Selenium is a powerhouse mineral that God gave us that is a basic element that is required to make life in this universe. It's on the periodic table of elements. Now it's time to put it in your belly and get it to your blood and into your brain. I'm Dr. Ardis. God bless you. I love you. Grateful for you. We'll see you next time on the Dr. Ardis Show.